Let me finish how to stop interrupting and change the world. We're all guilty of interrupting, but if we all just stopped and listened, argues Nancy Klein, we could radically change the way we live. I won't interrupt you. I promise I wouldn't interrupt your words or your thoughts. Imagine it. Imagine the relief, the possibilities, the dignity. You now have ground what is yours. Unassailably, this is for you. Time to think, to feel, to figure out what you really want to say it, to consider it, to change it, to finish your sentences, to choose your own words, to become, because you can trust the promise, a bit bold, even eloquent, to become you. And because you know I will not interrupt you, you will want, when you finish, to know what I think too, even if we disagree deeply. You open your heart and become you, in turn, promised not to interrupt me. I open mine. We all long for this, the promise of no interruption, the promise of interest, the promise of attention while we think, the promise of this much respect for us all as human beings. We long for that gentle, rigorous expanse that produces felt thinking and thoughtful feelings. Every day, in every interaction, vital or trivial, we hope for the kind of presence that lets our brains and hearts find themselves. We were born for this. In fact, says the science, we were born expecting it. Our brains need it to keep forming. When we were infants, almost marsupially. They still do. To say full Homo sapiens, our minds and hearts need this promise. And yet, it is nowhere. We look around, we can't find it. We see only interruption. Our colleagues interrupt us, our professionals interrupt us, our beloveds interrupt us, our friends interrupt us, and we interrupt. Where in your circles can you point to a single person who you are certain will not interrupt you when you speak? Who in your circles has ever made this promise to you and kept it? And have you ever made that promise to anyone else? Most likely not. That is the shocking truth. The one thing we can absolutely depend on in life is that we will not interrupt or be interrupted when we start to think. In fact, according to the Gotham Institute in Seattle, 3 years ago, the average listening time of even professional listeners was 20 seconds. Now, it's 11. 11 seconds. I shudder when I hear that. And those of us who are paid to listen, coaches, therapists, doctors, managers, leaders, teachers, pastors, advisors, have paid for endless instruction in how to listen. But the instruction is effectively in how to insert, how to tailgate, how to justify the population of silence in our own view. It is listening that expects us to interrupt. So it seems, certainly, observably, it does not require us to promise not to. And so we interrupt, all of us, paid and not, professionals and parents, leaders and learners, wage earners and shareholders. We move through our days and years interrupting others and failing to foil it when others interrupt us. And that matters. Interruption diminishes us. It diminishes our thinking. And the face of it, our own thinking barely has a chance to form. That means that our decisions are weaker. Our relationships are thinner. Interruption of thinking is so destructive, in fact, that we have produced as a species. However advanced it may be in the animal kingdom, it's probably inferior to the achievements of uninterrupted human mind might have produced over those eons. In fact, you can mention just about any stubborn issue in your life, and I would wonder whether you might have resolved it already had it not been interrupted so many times on the road to now. I also could name almost any innovation from howling steam engines to hollowed cyberspace and argue that humanity, most of the vital questions humans being have asked through the ages, how we can educate, how we can heal, how we can earn, how we can govern, how we can judge, who should be rich and who poor, who is right, might have produced more sustainable, egalitarian, integrated, dignifying answers if we had not interrupted each other so often in conversation and meetings and musings. If we had not interrupted ourselves because other interruptions over the years have convinced us we didn't have much to offer anyways. In our relationships, I surely don't need to articulate the difference in promise of no interruption might have made in every single relationship since humans developed a language. Think about yours. Imagine your relationships without interruption. Imagine the sweet, stimulating sturdiness that would grow. I often wonder if divorce figures would reduce dramatically if there had been a vow of no interruption at a wedding. Then, as if interruption by each other were not enough to minister to diminish the diminishment of our independent minds and the shrinking of meaning in our relationships, enter smartphones. More accurately, hurt phones or stupid phones, with their built-in servicing of platforms that colonize our attention. They slap our brains into stupidity. Relentlessly distracted, our thinking begins to hemorrhage. This loss is not wholly the device's fault, of course. It's mostly ours. Even with the smartphone on purpose designed in distraction notification architecture, our prostration at the non-human feet is the real issue. Our obsidian demotes the advanced humans, and we pretend it doesn't. We don't take charge of our attentions. Our little robots do, and we caress them. This we can stop. We can stop all forms of interruption. We can decide right now to be the masters of our attention, to commit to the flourishing of our minds, our hearts, and our very nature. This attention, this promise not to interrupt, this act of breathing free is prodigious. It changes things, even the big things. It bestows sanity. It shapes and reveals and shapes again who we are. It offers ease in the face of uncertainty. It can stop things like hatred and start things like love. It rescues our meetings from the vacuity, creates fabulous places to work, brings humanity to leadership, and leadership to humanity. Attention have told me it's what we mean by God. It launches the dreams we have for ourselves, yes, but also the dreams for the world. We all have them, even the most cynical of us. We've just grown wary and weary and willing to walk away from each other and from ourselves. This promise of no interruption, this sustaining and generative attention can turn us toward each other. In fact, the decision not to interrupt each other is powerful enough to mitigate the prepotent relationship issues of our time, the issues that cleave our conversations at work, in politics, in families, and invisibly inside ourselves. The social verification we call polarization. This contemporary scourge is ancestral, and it is high time we faced it down by facing its cause. Polarization is not the result of disagreement, it's the result of disconnection. When we connect from each other, we see each other no longer as human beings, but as threats. We polarize. And the first, most forceful disconnector is interruption. I think polarization starts with and is fed by interruption. The minute one of us asks in stark disagreement, interrupts the other, the brain registers the interruption as a physical assault. Immediately, the brain hormones of adrenaline and cortisol bathe the cortex, the very center of our thinking. The amygdala, dictator of feeling, dispatches the tribunate actions of freezing, fleeing, fighting, and presto, we disconnect. Our thinking shrivels and polarization is born. But I've seen people stop the cycle. I have seen them gather instead, determined to understand each other, not to convince each other. Crucially, they have arrived having promised to stop interrupting. They have agreed, 1, to start giving attention, and 2, to stay interested in where others' thinking will go next. 3, to share the stage equally. The promise of no interruption, consisting of those 3 ingredients, changed their conversations forever, and polarization fizzled. New possibility emerged. Those 3 ingredients walked forward together, not into the sunset. It's better than that. They walked into the grit and gossamer of new thinking and spring from emotional integrity, understanding the mutual cherishing of the effects of this powerful promise. I will not interrupt you. It changes everything. Good, you may be thinking, I'm in, but surely I don't need to read on. Can I just take your point and stop interrupting and tra-la, change the world? In theory, yes. It should be enough for us to just notice this out-of-control, societal reward, devastating practice of interrupting, this wholesale and sanctioned violence against independent thinking, and resolve to stop it today. But it isn't. The practice of interrupting people's speaking and thinking is fed by an ideological level inside us. We think that it's the right thing to do. We really do. Oh, we know it's not really polite or considerate, so sometimes we apologize as we do it, but we keep doing it. We think it's nearly always justified, and maybe we even, at very best, thing that can happen at the moment. We think we're saving time by knocking down the person while talking, while we hold forth. Delusion takes some doing to undo. First, we really need to understand that interrupting is a violent act. To begin with, we need to understand that interruption is what it is. We have to recognize all of its precocious and artful forms. And then we have to examine it at a cellular level. We have to see the untrue assumptions that drive it, take them apart, and start over with true ones. Keeping the promise of no interruption is a tough job because this promise is a vast galaxy of things. It stretches past all of our once field. It defies our gulping. Its whole cannot be parsed, and yet it cannot be understood. Yet it has to be understood. Every day over the years, I have thought repeatedly that I have seen this promise in all its glory. I have thought each time I saw it and had it down. There was no more to see, no more to add to its definition or its effect. I have felt confident that I was doing justice as I wrote, as I taught, as I spoke, as I tried every day to live it. I have committed to its treasure and be sure it held into my arms. But before I could breathe it out, I have startled, seen it as if for the first time, and I've had to smile. I've also have seen people claim this promise, clip it to their listening portfolios, sell it in their skill set, and not come close. It's as if we can never know it. It's as if it's here and not here, evidence and elusive, finished and photo at once. I think this is because this promise is different from anything else we do with each other. I want to say that again. This is different. It is different because it requires a doning of humility, a rich regard for difference and for others. It is different because it upends the appearance of stability, because it wants to and does produce independent thinking. It's so subversive. It is different because it requires us to stop wanting to impress and to start wanting to be free. It changes what we call expertise. It changes what we charge for and pay for and what we reward. It can change our very purpose. This promise and its luminous effects are different, but humans cannot see difference all at once. Our predepositions, our rituals, our norms, in this case, interruption, and its frayed, fractious outcomes are our habituated contexts. They are a reference point for what it is. So they are all we see. We therefore have to feel those remorseless norms one by one in order to notice their radiant absence. This feeling begins by facing the emptiness of our excuses for interruption. I must clarify, I must correct, I must look smart right now, I must enrich, I must follow my own curiosity. I know where you're going with this. I need to take you elsewhere. Your unformed thought will be less valuable than my formed one. I am more important than you are. I looked stupid not talking. No one needs to listen this long. You will never stop. None of these is worthy of us, so I hope that you will step away from that crepuscular culture and follow the first light, the soon-to-be obvious power of this promise and of its effect on intelligence in front of us, including your own. To stop interrupting in order to 1. Start giving attention, 2. Sustain interest in where the person will go next, and 3. Share the stage, which compromises possibly the simplest cluster of complex change we will ever make.